Hello. Good morning. Hi.
Margaret, is that your real background, or is that a green screen? That's incredible.
That's our inner cloister at our center.
Wow.
Wow.
So come see us. Come see us, because we've got a lot of empty rooms right now.
Yes. Retreat center humor.
We have vacancies.
Yes.
Left, right, and center. I'll be interested to hear everybody's experience, but I know that part of it is the closure, and so we just got a few people trying to keep all our plants watered and do repairs and the basics to try and keep viable when we can open, which may not be until 21 at this rate.
Yeah.
Boy, it's enough to give us all heartburn. So, important time to be talking together.
Mm-hmm.
I think, Ben, you proposed that we meet every week. Hi, Pat.
There.
Yeah, weekly meetings seemed more and more important as the pandemic increased around us. So I'm glad we're doing this.
If nothing else, to keep up our own mental health.
Yes.
Oh, welcome. It's so great to see some new faces. Okay.
I am recording this call. I guess I want to say that we are trying to record all these. And another thought that I had is that we haven't taken any screenshots. We haven't of our Zoom community. And so if people are open to that, that might be a nice thing to do at the end of this call. Because it's really hard to show that we're together, but we are. So.
Well, the gallery view really allows us to appreciate all these many good people doing this work. So heartening to meet you virtually.
Yeah. Well, welcome everybody. My name's Jean Richardson, and we're gonna we have about an hour and a half or a little less at this point to be together. And clearly we have lots of questions and wonderments about COVID and how that's affecting all of us. And it's really good to see new faces on our screen. So welcome, and welcome to the collaboration. It's a wonderful lifeline to each of us, and a good place to do conversation as well as brainstorm about how do we face some of the questions that are before us. We didn't know how many were going to be on this call. And so one of the things we decided was that instead of taking up time, even though it's really critical to introduce ourselves to each other, that we're going to actually do that in breakout rooms. And what brought this meeting all together was Brooke Lehman of Watershed Center up in New York raised some very interesting questions about, just how some of them were practical and some of them were wonderments, and some of them were like, what advice do you have around, COVID-19 and how it's affecting all our centers? So what we've arranged to do today is to break out into at least 3 groups, and maybe 4. We were trying to think about between 8 and 10 in a group. We have 4 people that are willing to take notes and sort of just facilitate and watch time, and that's their only role, as far as like, they will fully participate in the conversation, to be in the breakout rooms, and we'll do introductions in those breakout rooms, and then we'll come back as a whole to talk about whatever, any insights that we have, and any suggestions we might have for the collaboration. So that's sort of the agenda. Again, I'm really grateful as I look around this screen to see the number of new faces that have joined us, and I want to say welcome to all of you, and I hope you find this collaboration is helpful in your lives as staff and directors of retreat centers, as I do. So Brooke, do you want to introduce us to the questions that we have for groups today, and then Justine, maybe you can talk to us about exactly the process, and probably everybody will be in by then. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Brooke.
Sure. So thank you. Thank you to all the folks that are doing all the behind the scenes work in this collaboration. I think, like many of you, I joined last year not knowing how absolutely vital this group of people would be to me, just for my sanity going through COVID. And I've talked to a lot of my friends being like, oh my God, I'm in this retreat center collaborative. It feels so good to be able to say that I'm communicating with 75 people around 75 retreat centers around the country. And some of you I've just been in awe of just, just seeing your communications coming out in this moment. And so, yeah, and I decided to just email the group, since I had everyone's emails from our communications asking my questions, which it's been really helpful just to see people reflect on some of them. And this is probably the first week where I personally have felt like I could come up for air, feeling like, okay, now maybe I am ready to sort of make some decisions here about what we're doing, but really looking to have the support of you all, and hearing what your thought processes are in this moment around, particularly around when we can reopen. I can't say if, but I know for many of us it might be if. But the when question just still seems very amorphous to me, but I feel like I would love to, by the end of this week, at least have some criteria and some definitions for what that could look like in terms of being able to communicate that to our community. And so you saw my sort of ridiculous list of 10 questions, which are all real, but just sort of off the top of my head. And we had a really lovely call, Justine, Jean, and I, and narrowed some of those down. And so the questions that we wanted to look at in breakout groups are basically a brief introduction. Who are we? What's the center, and what is our context? What is our plan, our center's plan, if we have one? Do you have a plan that is a sort of we're reassessing every 6 weeks, or whatever that number may be? Do you have a 6-month plan? Have you picked a date for reopening? Sort of do you have a plan, or what are your thought processes around that? How did you arrive at this decision? What factors are you weighing in this process? So some of that may be, we are talking to our constituents, we're talking to our board, our staff is involved. What are the factors that you're weighing into this, whether they're medical, whether they're, based on staff comfort, all of those pieces. And then sort of more of the feeling aspect of this. What are the feelings of loss and frustration, which I'm sure are very rampant for many of us. And then what are the opportunities in this moment for us? And for at least Watershed, this is a moment of pause that we could actually fill with some really good thinking, or some other ways of being involved in our community that I know many of us are doing. So sharing what those opportunities may be, and then how can we support each other in this moment? So those are the questions we were going to bring to the breakouts. And And I think that our hope is that out of those breakouts, we're going to do some report backs, but that the report backs really look at some best practices or anything that's sort of like meaty and exciting. So it's not just sort of a gloss of a survey of what happened, but if there's anything that felt really exciting that you wanted to share out to the group, or any aspects of those things that really were a standout for you. How does that sound?
Thanks, Brooke. That was a great explanation. And I'm so grateful that you emailed all of us last week and that the RCC was quick to respond. And thank you, Ben, for setting this up. So as Jean and Brooke said, and I'm just reiterating, we'll break into groups, and we have assigned facilitators already. I'm thankful to Kirsten, Brooke, Jean, and I will be taking notes. If there's anything that you don't want us to share, please let us know. I don't think the breakout sessions are recorded. Is that correct, Ben? Yes, nodding yes. And then, so
they
we
are
have
not recorded, yes.
about 30 to 40 minutes. Ben, I'm going to ask that you do a check-in with us, 30 minutes, and see how we're doing for time. And then we'll come back and either the facilitator can share the 1 to 2 takeaways that Brooke mentioned, or if you have time in your group, you can decide who's going to share. But please start with the question, who are you and what context, as Brooke had said. Do you have a small retreat center? Where is it located? Are you a part of a larger organization, just to give context? And then we can all sit with whatever questions suit us. After that time we're in breakout sessions, we'll come back to the 1 or 2 takeaways. And then moving forward, how can we each support each other and how can the RCC support it?
A question. As we break into breakout groups, there may be ideas that are shared that could be useful to everyone. How do you foresee sharing those if you only have 1 or 2 takeaways from your conversation? I mean, I for one would love to hear what's going into people's decisions, just to see that I'm including a broad enough thinking. And I also know that people are coming up, and maybe this is a future call, with some creative ways to continue programming and the more thinking that can support what we do locally from the experience and expertise of others in the group could be really an immense help in cross-fertilizing. So perhaps keep that in mind, that there's a wealth here that we may never be able to tap into otherwise, and that could be huge for our smaller centers.
Margaret, I think that's a wonderful add-on, and so I've asked the facilitators to take notes, and Ben does an amazing job of sharing the recordings and also the notes after, including everyone who's on this call.
Thank you.
So my job will be to sort of collate all those separate notes and make a complete version, and that is shared in the community call folders, which is open to all of us who participate. So we can go back and look at previous calls. I have the breakout room groups set up, 5 groups with 6 people in each group. And I don't know if more people have again joined the call. I think we're up to 32 last I checked. So we'll see how this goes. Some people I may need to add manually. Are we ready to go? Light speed. Okay, here we go.
Hey, Ben.
Hello.
Did one group not have a facilitator?
No, I think we were okay.
Great.
Yeah. This is my favorite part, seeing everybody just pop up like bubbles.
We're popping up like dandelions in the spring.
The dandelions are covered with snow at the moment.
Oh dear.
Our daffodils.
Are we all together again?
I don't know, are we all here?
Looks like it.
Thanks. So. Wonderful. Welcome back, everyone. So I can't believe how quick the 45 minutes flew for at least group 5. So now we have about 15 minutes to talk about 1 to 2, 3 helpful takeaways that you've talked about in your group. And since I'm speaking, I think I'll go first and talk a little bit about what we spoke about. And in our takeaways. So we sat a lot with questions and then added more questions. We're really in a space of unknown, but it was nice to be together and chat about it. So we really focused on the opportunities for the moment. How can we hold the space to have these conversations about what's gone and what's to come and welcome new opportunities in? Tada Magoosh talked about advocating and hosting agricultural migrant workers. There was talk about people who had space to adopt a garden so people could be outside and land was still tended to. We also talked about new pieces of consideration. So how do we keep our online programming that we've made for this time? Even when we open in a physical space, we will continue to keep online programming. And with our retreat facilitators and leaders, how are we making sure we're all on the same page and not competitive? If we charge a specific amount, how do we know the next day they're not charging a different amount?
Mm-hmm.
Being more transparent about our intentions and what other people are doing. And then finally, our last takeaway was really a call to the RCC, which was thinking about drafting something about how spiritual and retreat centers are vital in a time like this and will be vital moving forward. So we're all not writing our own why we're essential, but maybe something as a collaborative we could produce. So those were a couple of our takeaways. And I think we'll invite whoever wants to share, just share a couple of your takeaways as well.
I'm happy to go next.
Thanks,
It would have could have used so much more time. I feel like we got to a lot of practical sharing about where we are with things, and it was very helpful to hear everyone's different strategies and geographic context. 2 of the things I shared with the group that I was hearing as themes throughout were one on the very practical side of what the retreat center collaboration can offer to each other in the coming months and year is that none of us is an infectious disease expert. And we're feeling very kind of nervous about making sure that we feel equipped to guarantee a safe space to our guests when they come back. And so how can we share with each other to build our own confidence, our collective confidence that we're doing things well, to be able to honor the safety needs of our guests. And then also this theme of the known and the unknown, that we as retreat centers are equipped for holding space for people to do deep inner work. And this time is demanding that more than ever. We know how to do this, we're ready for this, and yet there's so much that is unknown that we're having to adapt those abilities and those spaces for. So figuring out together how we adapt our programming, how we adapt our emotional support networks, all of that sort of thing, while also taking care of ourselves in this critical moment when, you know, if before it was important to take care of ourselves while we took care of others, all of it is just more. All of it is more now. And so how do we support each other in that? So those were two themes coming out of our conversation.
Great, thank you.
I'll go next. What such rich conversations. So I was in a group with Brooke, Brooke, Adam, Janine, Heather, Pat, and Abdul Rehman, and I apologize if I'm missing someone. Just a few additional themes that came out. This sort of how to hold true of the essence of these spaces came out, the sort of sense of being really kind of aligned with who we are and having that come through, that kind of grounded in mission and having that come through in action. Heather from Woodby talked about sort of the discernment process that a full team goes through and kind of navigating what's going on in the world and how to make sort of the next step decisions. And Janine from OAC was talking about their justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion work and kind of the opening of this moment in time to be kind of exploring what does it look like and how are we going to be different and kind of move into this commitment in our next incarnation. Just a couple of other things that came up, sort of a recognition that there are some, parts of who we are and some parts of our current incarnation that may not be possible to come back. And so sort of a grieving and sort of a letting go of that. And then and also some interesting points around the PPP. A number of folks in our group had received the PPP. It was underway as of last Monday, and kind of having the discipline to not get into sort of activity for activity's sake with employment now, while the work itself has radically changed. So as it looked like to stay true to essence when you do have staff and the work has changed. And the last thing I'll say was people talked about what I think was like an adaptive strategy, kind of planning in increments, having different sort of dates by which they're thinking about opening, doing financial modeling around that, not sort of holding too tight to those assumptions and listening really kind of deeply and then making some kind of nearer term decision making as those timeframes come closer.
Thanks, Diana.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be happy to go next. Boy, our group represented really the wonderful diversity of this growing network. We had 3 people who were in larger settings and larger retreat centers, and 3 that were in much smaller settings. So we had Eve and Margaret and Arlene, Greg and Chris and myself. It was a really rich conversation. Bar none, the best idea was goat bombing at Pearlstone from Eve. That actually, goat Zoom bombing was the idea.
Wait, Jean, you just muted.
I'm sorry. Gosh, I just muted. It's because I moved my notes. So did you hear the thing about goat bombing?
Yes.
Zoom goat bombing. Okay, cool. All right, because that really was the most important thing we talked about. The rest was pretty depressing. Some of the takeaway ideas. One would be longer term residencies, to have people come to our retreat centers because we have beds, and maybe, you know, to do some deep work that they wouldn't have the opportunity to do before. That would be, of course, coupled with, you know, some quarantining time, and what would that look like with testing. So that's one thing. I think one thing that was clear is that all these centers are moving toward really working locally and reaching out to their local community as much as they can in a way that keeps their name recognition up, keeps their relationship going, and the opportunity to build new ideas. Eve has done a lot of work at Pearlstone, with pivoting, trying some of their businesses, especially around food service, and connecting with the school districts and local hospitals. You know, these are seen as temporary ways to keep their staff employed. About half the group, or maybe less than half, got some funding, and other people in our group are still on a waiting list. As we talked about some generation of new ideas, we've talked about, you know, how do we use some of the groups that rent our space, and where's the fundraising opportunity in there. What is marketing in the work that we're doing versus what is viable to continue as we move forward. And we talked a lot about, as we come out of this, you know, what help could this collaboration offer? And we talked about how it is that we could share easily best practices, what one of us learned, how do we share it with another, how do we put on shared Google Docs and share our resources. How do we think together about timing and get the expertise that we need to really think through when it's safe for our staff. And I think that's sort of the major pieces. So it was nice to really feel kind of, as always in these retreat conversations, it's nice to talk to people who talk our same language, who understand some of the intricacies and dilemmas that we face as far as this issue, and together think of some solutions. So thanks, it was a wonderful time.
Thank you. Is there one more group?
Margarita had to get off the call. She was leading group 2. Is there another volunteer from group 2 who could maybe give us the highlights?
I'll jump in, since I probably stole the most time. There was a lot of discussion on the planning question, which was brought back, thanks to Mary primarily, to be visioning, but it was the, as someone else said, the prioritization of safety first and foremost for staff on site, followed by safety for those who might come through the building. My center that exploded was, okay, there might be a time soonish when shelter in place lifts, and it may be applicable by law to open our doors. My particular place in Illinois, in the city of Chicago, but the ramifications of social distancing, whether imposed by legal mandate or just government guidelines, all of a sudden an 88-bed facility really can't host 88 folks who may not have canceled yet. They might be in the fall. And if you're doing 6 feet of social distancing, you know, all of a sudden your dining hall shrinks. I mean, not by square footage, but by how many folks you can host in there. The conference space that you said could hold 100 people, all of a sudden can only hold 35. So, but then you go back to staff, all the things you change around. So it's prioritization of safety, the vexing nature of so many moving parts, not just from a legal standpoint, but then from our own mission-driven ethical standpoint for those in our charge by way of employees or guests. So we did a lot on the planning and trying to be a vision, and then talked about how we could continue to communicate with each other to be able to support. I think that's a decent synopsis.
Thanks, Mark. So lots of conversation, and it sounds like lots of groups wanted to continue talking and still had many questions they're holding that are unanswered. And I see Arlene is also using the text box to talk about what else we may want to talk about in the future. So with our remaining 15-ish minutes, we had hoped to talk about how we can support each other moving forward. And it sounds like information sharing and best practices is one of those ways. What else could we be doing as the RCC in supporting everyone?
I just want to make a plug for information sharing. I actually really appreciate just getting, if folks wanted to email out, I see in the notes, Arlene is talking about house cleaning protocols. Like, I find it so useful. I would not mind my inbox filling up with really useful documents coming from you all. I know that might not be appealing to other folks, but it's better for me than a Google Doc that I have to search for. I actually would really love if somebody feels like they have something clear that they've come up with, to share it out. It feels really clarifying for me to read.
Brooke, while you have the mic, I wonder if you would talk a little bit about your friend who's the physician, and if a
Sure.
conversation with him would be helpful for the centers, and would they like to participate, and then we could figure out how to schedule it.
Sure. It's actually my partner who's on here with me's best friend from college, Caesar Javarharian, who is a MD in the Berkeley area. He's an ER doctor himself, and he started an urgent care center called Direct Urgent Care that is a sort of a mobile and an alternative urgent care center. But he also started Carbon Health, which is a multi-million dollar project that they're working on, which in part is now come up with an at-home test for COVID-19. And the USDA is working on passing that. And in addition, his urgent care place was developed to sort of transform how healthcare is delivered and focus on the patient experience. And they've tested thousands of patients without infecting any of their staff. And he's just a really lovely, lovely human being who, for all of his frontlineness, is just a very gentle person. And Greg and I we felt guilty about it, but we've had his ear for Watershed of just like asking him questions about the likelihood of different medical innovations. And I can't say, he does have, he has even some, he's a really good person to talk to, even about the home health kits and, their level of safety for us. But we've just really been talking to him about what are the possibilities and what needs to be in place in order for us to reopen. And he has graciously offered to talk to this network this Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern time, 1 p.m. Eastern time, 10 a.m. Pacific time. And Ben would put it out there. Can I just see with like twinkly hands if people would be excited to, and I'm sure we could video it as well, but if people would be excited for that, because, okay. I told him that he would have a good reach and that there are a lot of people that would be really excited to have that conversation, but he's obviously busy. So that is there. We will confirm with him and get that out as a Zoom call. And I guess if people have particular questions that they'd like to have him answer, you could email them to me or to Ben, and we can sort of give him some advanced questions that he can think about.
Would this be on one of these Tuesday calls? Because that could be very impressive.
So I got Jean had said, I had suggested Tuesday and she was like, well, really anytime. And he's so busy with his work, he can do 10 a.m. on Friday. So it's this Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern time, 10 a.m. West Coast time. So 1 p.m. East Coast time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts or things we want to share with the group? And then maybe Jean can take us out.
Can I add one thing? And I don't know the timing on this, but just because in our small group, we talked about the PPP loan, one sort of milestone I'm seeing up ahead is the forgiveness piece. I know a lot of us have applied for it with the intention or with the strategy that it would be forgiven. So at some point, to coalesce this group to collaborate any learnings from that, because currently the language is so vague and everybody's right now just trying to get the loan, let alone get it forgiven. But I'm sure that's going to be another sort of rat's nest in the system. So would love to do that, whether it's 8 weeks out or as we get closer. I don't have a sense of the timing now, but I know I will when we get closer to it.
Is there something that's helpful in the nearer term on that, Janine, in terms of, I don't know, documentation or anything that you're doing now to support the longer term forgiveness?
Yeah,
as
as
think
a
about
non-
timing something.
I'm sorry?
Just as we think about the sequencing of a conversation around that.
I've been on a few local webinars with SBA officers, through California nonprofits, and just these various things, and legal entities that are, offering things through that comes into my mailbox. However, we're still trying to figure out if anyone has access to like a legal help, that I think would be a great help. Because everybody, again, interprets everything different. And then depending on whether you heard it yesterday versus today versus tomorrow, it's always different. So I think right now what we're looking for is just what we're doing is coming down with a list of questions to ask for legal advice in terms of parameters of forgiveness and how we'll know, again, because of bandwidth and capacity. We haven't reached out yet because they're not at that point right now. We just got the money. So happy to share any of that as it unfolds, but just putting a placeholder to share it in the broader collective as we all experience this, for those who have PPP loans, or if you end up getting the PPP loan through the second stimulus package of $40-some odd billion. Sorry, not 40, 400.
Yeah, I just want to express an appreciation through 3 threads with Brooke, Stan Wu, and what I learned in the PPP conversation 2 weeks ago. So I know that for me as an individual and for Would-Be Institute as an organization, that this network has been just so timely and absolutely essential. Brooke's question, hey, should we think about COVID-19 and the impacts of it? Her email coming out on the Thursday before Monday, I started to have an inquiry from a program leader about what our response is, prepared us to be able to field and not be shocked to see it unfold. So I'm just so grateful, Brooke, for that and your questions, and Stan Wu's perspective on one of these calls, as this was all unfolding, as he was experiencing people on the cruise ship there docked at the Bay Area. And then 2 weeks ago, we applied for the PPP with a very different understanding for how it would work. And we received it, and I would have been completely sideswiped had it not been for the conversation that we had with Commonweal's direction of how it actually works, that it was from, just from the moment of receiving the funds, that 8 weeks. So each one of these very concrete gifts has supported us in real ways. And our most important, I think, question going forward is the very nature of how we convene. How profoundly is it shifted? Preparing ourselves for the just being in relationship with reality over what we wish would be true. So now, Brooke, you're inviting this conversation with the doctor, so helpful, because the more that we can prepare ourselves to actually engage with truth instead of our, ideas about what might happen, I just feel so much stronger.
Thanks, Heather. That was a wonderful slide into kind of our closing together. And the first thing I want to say is, for those of you who have not been with this network before, welcome, welcome, welcome. Some of you have asked, can we invite others? Absolutely. We want this net to go as far as possible. We started this network as a way to build collaboration, and that's really our core of how it is we can help one another. We're not in this alone. If you would like some history about the collaboration or want any other information, why don't you contact Ben, and Ben can have a brief conversation with you, and then Ben knows many of the people who are in this collaboration already. They may be geographically close to you, or maybe they're philosophically close to you, that maybe we could do a little bit of pairing up and kind of bringing you in and giving you some history about who we are and how we do it. And Ben, do you want to say a word about the website, perhaps?
Yes, I'm excited about the website, which was just launched in the last week, and especially excited that we've already had 9 new people subscribe to be a part of our community calls and other events because of the website. They're subscribing through the website, so that's wonderful. I feel like that's why we need a website, to talk about who we are and what we're doing, and to make sure that we're connected to each other. So how we develop that going forward is going to be really important. And so I don't want you to feel like it's done. It's just started, and we need to know from you where that's going. So appreciate your input. Everybody has given me a lot of input.
Every voice is important, especially if you unmute the button. In this collaboration, we come from all across the continent. We come from a variety of different religious traditions. We come from a variety of histories, and it's in all that diversity that is our strength. And yet we all envision a world that could be a little kinder and a little more, take a few more breaths, and have an opportunity to ask some deeper questions. So we're all in the same work, really, when it comes to all of this. Those of you who know me know that I love poetry, and so I'm going to close this out with one of my favorite poems for this time, by a man who lived in Spain, and his name is Antonio Machado. And I had it up, and then it just went away, but it'll come back. So this poem obviously was originally in Spanish, but I'll read to you the translation. Antonio Machado, the poem is called Border of a Dream. Traveler, your footprints are the only road, nothing else. Traveler, there is no road. You make your own path as you walk. As you walk, you make your own road, and when you look back, you see the path you will never travel again. Traveler, there is no road, only a ship's wake in the sea. Friends, it's really been delightful to meet you, and I look forward when we can meet in person, but meanwhile we're meeting virtually. So travel well, travel safely, and know that you're not alone, that you're traveling with others. So thank you.